Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Ian Howells. You might know Ian as the co-founder of Traffic Think Tank. I worked together with him at the Grit Group as a senior advisor, and he's all around great SEO. He does a lot of freelance SEO consultant. So thanks, Ian, so much for joining us. How's it going?
No, thanks for having me, Vince. Going well. Same old over here, chugging along.
Yeah, I like the pool table in the background. For those of you listening, Ian's got like a very nice, very symmetrical background going on, which I appreciate here. So, Ian, today we're going to be chatting about link buying. I'm calling it the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's
lots of all those. Yeah.
a lot to go into here. Before we do, I just want to remind everyone to like and subscribe. Share this podcast with your friends, colleagues. The more that you get this stuff out there, the more I can bring on great guests like Ian. So, Ian, I'm going to start with like a kind of broad topic because this is very top of mind, and I'm going to kind of set the stage here. I was at Brighton SEO 2 months ago, the October conference, and they had a Q&A booth with John Mueller, and he was there situated right across from a link marketplace. I won't name who they are. And we just found that to be,
it's pretty good.
Yeah, it was laughable. It was kind of like a nice microcosm of where I think the state of the SEO landscape is with this kind of thing. You know, Google is in clear view of link buying and what is going on, and yet they don't really seem to be doing much. Since then, I have done this big study on SaaS link building method. Did see what looks like a pretty big link spam update in 2024, the June link spam update. I hadn't really dug much into that, but I do think they've actually done something to devalue some of these types of links. Nevertheless, with all the stuff going on, helpful content, AI overviews, you know, there's so much going on with Google these days. To me, buying links is a risk. Why do you think people still buy links?
So I think there's obviously a lot of different reasons, right? Like some people don't comprehend the risk of what they're doing, right? So they're buying them just because they think like there isn't, or they're unaware of the risk in it, right? Which is unfortunate, because if you're going to do a thing, you should know like the potential upside or the potential downside. But I think in general, like lots of folks still buy links because it works and because it's a hell of a lot easier than building a real brand. So a lot of folks take the like quote unquote easier way. I think that's gotten dicier over the last year and a half or so. But I mean, short answer is people do it and spend money on it because it's effective still and it still works.
So if I were to talk to pretty much every digital PR guest that's come on here, obviously they are very anti-link buying. I have never really done
Just
it. I've
ironic,
done it.
but
Yeah, right. I mean, you understand why. But you talk to most SEO people, and for the most part, people are into it, or open to it, I should say. But I think there's probably a gauge, right? There are, like you said, kind of the people that are just doing it, not really paying close attention to what they're doing. There are the people who are maybe working with an agency that's doing it. So again, they don't really have too much insight. And there's, you know, SEOs, smart people like you who are maybe doing it the quote unquote the right way, right? So if somebody came to you and asked you if they should buy links, you know, this is my setup. Should I be buying links or should I be going to an agency to scale this? When should they be buying?
Yeah, I think there's a couple like cohorts of sites where it tends to be really effective. I think the folks that have a legitimate brand, right? So like your base portfolio is sizable and strong, right? Like you have some major media links, like you have brand search volume, and what you're really missing is links to very specific pages, right? Like you're getting very, very targeted. We're worried about these 10 pages for these 30 or so SERPs. Like we've got very specific stuff in mind. We rank pretty well, but we're stuck in like the 5 or something, right? Like you're not way back on page 5. It's good for those situations, right? Because you're not building into a barren profile. It's not like the domain just launched and there's nothing there to kind of not mask, but like if the first links you build to a site are links that are obviously paid guest post links, like you're probably going to have a bad time at some point in the near future. So I think when there's a good baseline and you're getting very surgical on like these particular pages, these keywords, that's our scope of concern. And we need extra assistance kind of getting over the last hump to get to where we want to be. I think otherwise, folks who are in spaces where like it's just the norm, like if you try and go into crypto without purchasing links, like that's going to be a very difficult task because there are competitors that are spending tens of thousands of dollars a month doing link purchasing, right? So like just omitting yourself from a scalable tactic that all your competitors are doing and it's working from them is going to be a hard pill to swallow, right? Like that's going to be a difficult thing for you to try and fight against without doing the same thing. And then I think on the like extreme opposite end, ironically, like small, truly local, like brick and mortar service area businesses might need 20 links total and they're in good shape, right? Like you don't have to overdo it and be like, oh, if I'm buying links, like I've got to buy 10 links a month from now until eternity. Like you can get far in a lot of local markets with like a dozen or so links and then you're in good shape, which kind of is more useful for folks who are trying to like uphill battle which is less true now than it was a year ago for sure. But if a SERP you're in is full of aggregators, so like the Yelp type sites of the world, and you're a truly local business, it can be hard to, just accept that like, oh, I'm just going to like sit behind these 5 massive aggregator sites, even though I'm actually here and they're not. In fairness, Google's actually gotten way, way better. Well, better depends on your perspective, I guess. Way more likely to rank truly local businesses than aggregators in a lot of areas. So I think there's pockets where it makes sense, but I think the underlying piece for everybody is a little bit of what I talked about before, where like you just have to understand the risks of what you're doing, right? And for the most part, especially if you have an established site, and you're not trying to like have every link to a property be a paid link. Generally, the worst case scenario is you waste your money, right? That like you put your budget towards this thing, you purchase the links, and there's either no effect ever, or you get a good effect for a while, and then at some point those sites get torched and they stop working. Manual actions for purchased links, you have to be like pretty aggressive to trigger a manual action on it. So in general, the biggest negative seems to be like at some point they stop working and the benefit goes away, which is not a huge disincentive. Like that's not a big stick anymore. But yeah, I think that's generally where things are at right now. I think as long as you understand what you're doing and like what the potential downside is, that to me feels like a situation where like, okay, this is a decent avenue to explore, especially in combination with other initiatives that are going on.
So do you need other initiatives for this to work? Like I talk about this like link building being like pouring fuel into a fire, right? Like, but you mentioned, the local dentist or something. It's like they probably don't have a blog or what, like maybe they have a couple pages going on and that they're trying to rank for those. Is it the kind of thing where you can just spin up a site from scratch by building links? I mean, you kind of alluded to this, like, no, that's probably not the case if it's from scratch, but talk to me a little bit about that.
So it's high, like as anything in SEO, right? It's highly dependent on like what industry for local, what location, right? Like a dentist in Philadelphia versus a dentist in Poughkeepsie are going to be like completely different scenarios, right? So even within like a site type and an industry, it's not the same. So I think that's
I'd say it's very competitor driven, right? Like,
yes, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Like basically it's still a game of like, I need to do more than what the people in those spots today have done, right? So if you're in a small town and the other dentists aren't building links, right? Like a clean, easy to understand site, a Google Maps listing, a dozen good reviews from customers, like you could be good to go, right? But like if you're Manhattan, Philly, Miami, like probably not, right? So as ever, right? Like it's very, very just, it depends on who the competitors are and what they're doing, because the kind of foundational answer is like you're going to have to match and exceed whatever those folks have done.
Yeah. One thing I'm realizing should have probably done at the start of this is kind of maybe define paid links and kind of like the placements, because when I think of paid links, and tell me if you agree here, for the most part, like it kind of falls into a couple different buckets. And again, I saw this on that like SaaS link building analysis thing I did, where it's like the guest posting sites that purely exist, it's like a random news site, like tech news.
Site about everything.
Yeah, it's a site about everything. Like that's probably the most prevalent type. And then there's the agency, or maybe, it is a company, usually in the tech sector. It's like a SaaS company. They have a blog. They kind of get it. I feel like that's maybe like a step up. There are some publications who are like better versions of those crummy tech sites, right? There's niche sites where I think that's probably getting the most value, where it's, you can hone in. If you have a pet site or something, you can find Joe's pet blog that's looks good, and they're putting out good content, and you can kind of hone in on those very niche relevant links. What am I missing? I mean, like, do you ever reach out to people who aren't part of these link marketplaces, and you're just like, hey, it would be awesome if I get a link from this person here, would you consider me writing a guest post on your site or inserting a link for $200 or something? Do you ever do, like, is that part of it as well?
Yeah, so I think folks certainly do like net new outreach trying to do link purchasing. I think I'm completely going off of gut feel on this point. My assumption is that is a minority of the link buying market. I think most people are using a service or an agency or whatever. My presumption is that is the strong majority of the total purchasing that's going on. Marketplaces do a ton of that, right? Because they're trying to keep their inventory fresh and growing. So they're doing outreach to publishers. So like it will likely stem from that somewhere, right? But a lot of times it's a marketplace doing that, because if they get one more site in their inventory that can sell a link or 2 links a month, the more they can stack those up, the better they are, right? So, and they have a more compelling pitch. When the pitch is, hey, we want to buy placements, saying we're a marketplace that connects publishers and blah, 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 like there'll be consistent deal flow, rather than like if I email somebody cold, it's like, well, this is probably a 1-time or a 2-time thing, right? So I think in terms of what people would respond to, I would presume response rates from marketplaces are better than one-offs. But folks that have the patience to go through the operations of like warming and then standing up solid email delivery to do the like size and scope of cold email that you need to do to make that work, that absolutely happens. I just think even just from a technical standpoint of like being able to do that without torching an email, most people aren't in that bucket. So it does happen for sure, but I think the much more common is like you go to a service or you go to a marketplace and you do your link purchasing through one of those.
And for the most part, it is link insertions, or they write a guest post and place your link in there, right?
Yep. Yeah. Those are generally the 2 big buckets. It's like slide my link in like a new sentence or 2 sentences or something in an existing page, or net new article, so that the topic is a perfect match for the thing that I'm trying to place a link to.
Right. So, okay, let's get to like the biggest question I've had, and the kind of the reason that I don't do it. We talk about the risk is, they may just devalue these links. For the most part, you're not going to get fully penalized, because there's not an easy way for them to tell, usually Google. It's obviously against Google's guidelines, right? How do you think they check, if at all, for this type of link manipulation, we'll call it?
So they've done run-throughs of networks in the past. So this is a little bit different because it's more like buying into a PBN, which is hilarious that these were ever called PBNs, because the first P is supposed to stand for private. And once you start selling spots in it, it's no longer private, but blog networks. So I'm thinking like the big examples are from a long time ago. Like, I'm dating myself here, but like stuff like Build My Rank and Authority Link Network, like over the course of 24 to 48 hours, just hundreds of sites in those networks just got torched, right? So when something becomes a big enough problem, and generally when somebody is publicly complaining about a thing and making Google look stupid, they will give individual attention to a network of things happening, and you'll see just the entire thing get torched. We've seen at least claims over the last couple of years of folks that were very visibly public in the kind of black hat SEO, Twitter, or YouTube space claim that everything in their search console got torched, right? So like when the manual action eye turns on you, they will certainly follow the breadcrumb trail to anything that they can find. And like things will go very poorly from that point on. I have not seen them do that same thing, which is why the story you started with of John being right across from a marketplace is so funny, of sites going into, of like a Google employee joining a marketplace and just like exporting the publisher list and being like, okay, all of these. Why? I don't know. I guess it's deemed to not be worth the time to do it. And I know the strong preference, and they've stated this themselves, is always to fix things via the algorithm. They don't want to be like just manually playing whack-a-mole forever, which I understand, right? But like, it does seem a little strange. Like, yeah, you don't want to empower one person to be like the person that can get anything torched in Google, but like 20 FTEs in a company the size of Google is nothing. And then you just blind you send everybody in that group of 20 the same sites, and you blind like what ones were marked as spam, and they don't know who the other 19 people are. And like you get consensus out of a small group. And if everybody says like, oh, this Forbes folder is spam, you torch the thing. Like why that doesn't happen, I don't know, but it doesn't. And then same thing with link buying, right? Like presumably it's an easy problem to fix with manual actions, but like that hasn't been a thing that's really kind of like been the go-to in quite a while anyway. Like I said, it has in the past with those big link networks that existed, but I don't know of a guest post marketplace that's had that happen to them like the old link networks did.
So yeah, I mean, right. That's the biggest thing for me is why, like I've seen John Mueller on LinkedIn. I point to this experience a lot because I think it's kind of telling, although I don't know how much, if it has any credence at all, but somebody on, I think I had done my list of guest post sites, right, on BuzzStream, and I was sharing it on LinkedIn, and somebody sent me a spreadsheet as a comment. It was like, here's another bunch of guest post sites, right? And it was a spreadsheet, just fully straight up there, just linked in the comments. And John, who wasn't even part of this conversation at all, responded just saying thanks. And so, to me, it's like, okay, so he's going to go do something with these sites, right? Like, that's at least what I assume. I don't know, what's actually coming of that. But that does, I mean, to me, it makes it more inherently risky too, right? Is to be part of, and I forget who said this exactly, but one of my podcast guests was like, yeah, I would never want to be a site on one of those databases. Like, I don't want to be specifically like on the other side of it, right? Like I would never want my site publicly associated with buying
selling,
links. Or selling links. But do you really think it is that risky at this point if they haven't done anything?
Yeah, I mean, things can change very quickly, as we've seen many times, right? But so I don't know if part of it is a hesitancy because there's no actual verification. So like a bunch of link marketplaces, you'll go in and see like Forbes, HubSpot, the Wall Street Journal, right? And it is generally unclear if they can actually publish anything on those domains, or if those are added to make the marketplace look better, and then it has like a $3,000 price tag like it attaches a price tag that makes it unlikely that most people are ever going to even consider ordering, right? So there's a like weird, you don't really know, like, is this site actually in there? And then you have the problem of HubSpot could be legitimately in there because HubSpot could be using a contract writer that publishes frequently, who, without the knowledge of I'm just HubSpot is a random example I'm picking here. This could happen anywhere. Without the knowledge of HubSpot or whoever the actual company and publisher is, one of your freelancers or even one of your staff writers is making some cash on the side, selling a link or two a month for, multiple hundreds, if not $1,000+ right? So should you torch HubSpot's rankings because a rogue employee or contractor is accepting money to put links into articles? Like, probably not, right?
Yeah.
But, like, to your point earlier, like, how do you know? Right? You never really know how something is happening. So I don't know if that's part of the hesitancy, is like, you don't know. With a smaller site, the likelihood that that's what's happening goes down a lot. But I don't know if that possibility has kept Google away from like even bothering with these lists.
Yeah, I alluded to this earlier. Like, I do think so. You also kind of brought this up, this idea of like solving things algorithmically. Like, that's kind of how you should probably think about these risks, right? So in my case, when I was looking at the June link spam update, it almost seemed like Google might be devaluing any of the like links that appear in these like listicle type posts. Because what I've seen more and more happening is, especially in the technology space, I'll just call it technology, it's maybe software, but not specifically that, but like these listicles where it's like the best X for Y, right? The best software for HR companies. What I've seen and I've experienced firsthand is people be like, I'm going to write this article. I'll include you if you also link back to me in some other post, right? So it's like a link exchange, but also like you're providing some value to their site or something. It's just been like this exploited thing. And I'm sure there are real listicles out there. Not all of them are bad, but it seems to be this.
A lot of them are bad.
It seems to just be this tactic now that has been exploited to death and potentially Google is devaluing. And so let's think about this. I'd love your thoughts on kind of, if we do think that Google would want to solve for this algorithmically, what are some things that you avoid? Because I know you and I have talked about this in the past, like these are the signals you should avoid on the site. And to me, that's probably the reason you'd want to avoid most of them, right? So what are some of those signals that you want to avoid on a website that would make link buying more risky?
So I think the most logical to me way to fight it at the algorithm level is probably much of what they're doing already, where like when you run afoul of the existing algorithms in terms of what sites do we trust to rank highly and send a lot of traffic to, short version, if you can't rank for anything, the links out from your site probably don't pass much value, right? So like there's some threshold that you surpass where like you used to rank for a bunch of stuff and now you do not. Well, my strong presumption is that the outbound links from your site no longer pass much of any value anyway. And Google's stance is probably like, well, if we get these sites out of the SERPs, which we want to do anyway, and when that happens, the outbound links don't pass much authority to begin with, who cares if people waste their money buying links that then don't help them? So like, we don't need to do anything. This problem will solve itself. People can waste their own budget if they're trying to buy links. Who cares? Is my guess at what's actually going on. It's easy to avoid sites that have gotten torched. You just have to pay attention, right? Like just pop into, tool of choice and look at their 2-year traffic history. And if they've lost 40+% of their traffic, that's probably a really bad sign. And you should think twice about spending part of your, I'm sure, limited budget on buying a link from that publisher. it's harder to check every potential leading indicator for like, is this a site that a year from now will have lost 40+% of their traffic, right? So the stuff that folks will commonly look at is what does the outbound link profile look like, right? Are they, if you look at external links, and again, tool of choice, and you look at the anchor text for the outbound links, does it read like a highly valuable keyword list? Right? Are they using anchor text that's like best XYZ? Legal lawyers throw a lot of budget around, so agencies on behalf of lawyers end up buying a bunch of links. Whether the attorneys know that or not is questionable. Buying links for an attorney, as an aside, without them knowing about it seems like a very stupid thing to do, but here we are.
Another podcast.
So heavy presence of like legal terms, casino, CBD, like the high dollar affiliate industries. If you scroll through the external links and like it looks like a keyword list from those niches, like that's probably a good sign that like the site's selling a whole lot of links, and like that just ups the likelihood that something goes wrong in the future, especially on the casino front, because those sites will offer a lot of money for a placement. So like that's usually the dam bursting moment where like a site may say no to offers to sell a link, but like if a casino site offers you $1,000 to put a link into one article and it's going to take you like 5 minutes, it's hard for a site owner to turn that down, right? And then once you do it once, it's like, oh, screw it. Like I sold one, like I may as well. So watching the external links is a biggie. And then I think the other telltale signs, you can check drop history, right? Because a lot of folks will recover a dropped domain that has some decent stats and relaunch content and try and cobble some traffic together, right? So you may end up being able to avoid networks of sites that explicitly exist to sell links on now, even if they were legitimate sites in the past. So that's one to watch out for as well. And then the other biggie is looking for patterns of sites trying to artificially inflate their traffic on stuff that isn't actually core to what their topic is about, right? So you'll see a lot of finance sites do this a lot, where they'll be trying to sell a link for like $200, $300, $400. And then you look and it's like, oh, they get 12,000 visits a month. Like, okay, decent sign. And then you go into their top pages or their top keywords report, and it's all like XYZ person net worth. Right. And it's like, all right. Like, okay, so you're not really ranking for like any of the, like if I'm, pushing a credit card affiliate site, like none of your credit card content's ranking for anything. All your estimated visits and tools come from this like net worth section or conversions. Like they'll launch a programmatic SEO thing about converting, pounds to dollars or whatever. So being on the lookout for like tangential topics that seem to serve the primary purpose of like check the box of the domain has traffic in all the third-party tools. So when it gets listed in the marketplace, it's a GR50 and it's got 12,000 visits a month, that like you're just kind of massaging the data to get to the point where you'll pass the initial sniff check and folks will buy a placement. So digging in deeper on that to see like where does their traffic come from. And the interesting one on there too is when folks use the default WordPress URL pattern. If you see all their top pages are from like 2021, 2022, and then magically nothing they've published in the last 2 years is getting even like 20 visits a month, like that's a good sign that there's a problem. And you probably don't want to buy a new link because none of the new stuff is able to rank for anything. There's just some legacy stuff that's still kind of alive and kicking.
Yeah, those are great tips. The idea of like the inflated traffic was one that was recently pointed out to me, that, and you'll even see, I mean, somebody brought up the fact that like they will be nonsense keywords too. Some of them are just like strings of letters and stuff that they use because that's all people look at. It's just the search traffic and the DR.
Or non-US countries is another one. So if you so a lot of marketplaces will show worldwide traffic. But then if you start delineating by country, US traffic will be nothing, and traffic from like India or Pakistan will be 10,000 visits a month. But like the total looks fine until you start like peeling back the layers a little bit.
Right. Yeah, you know what's funny? I want to get back to one of the things you said in the beginning about helpful content. You mentioned, I think you said it's getting dicier, right,
Mm,
to work with the link marketplaces, especially after helpful content. One of the
mm,
analyses I recently did, I mentioned this guest posting sites blog post that I have. I essentially went through. This was almost a year ago. I went through about 800. I basically went through all the top ranking posts for guest
mm,
posting sites and exported all their lists, put them all together,
gotcha.
deduplicated them, and I was
Mm,
left with like 800 or something. And
mm,
then I cut them down for quality. And I mainly looked at search traffic and DR, but then I also looked at some, like I had somebody help me go through each of them and look for some of these other key
mm,
factors similar to what you're talking about. And now I redid it again after the helpful
mm.
content updates, and my list was like 167 or something, and now it's down to 102 or something. Um,
Of sites that
of
still
sites that
get
are
traffic, or
the sites that, yes, that get qualified enough, which was over
mm,
10,000. So
gotcha.
long-winded way to say that after the helpful content update, I saw a lot of these sites that accept guest posts. They are still quality sites. They still got hit.
Mm,
Um, and I want to get back to something you said earlier in a previous conversation with you and I, is like, it seems like this bucket of sites to work with is getting smaller and smaller. Um,
mm,
can you elaborate on that? Are there any themes? Like, is it specific industries that you saw this going down on, or
mm.
I'd be curious to see your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple. I think there's two things happening at the same time. One is post HCU, folks who had their sites get hit and lost their income. Some portion of them went, well, I got to find some way to, like, I need money coming in, right? Like I have to have some way to generate revenue from these things. And so if a marketplace will list it and people buy links on the thing, like, okay, fine, right? Like my, Mediavine or whatever, like my display ad revenue went to zero, my Amazon associate revenue went to zero or near zero. If people will pay me $100 for a link, like that's better than the $0 a day I'm earning now. Like I got to get something going. So then you see this push of inventory expansion of sites that aren't actually all that good, right? Which then is on the marketplace, right? Like the marketplace is the first line of defense of like doing diligence to make sure that like these are good sites, and that will vary widely from vendor to vendor. So I think that's one, is like you see the pie expand with sites that are having trouble ranking because they're just trying to find a way to generate revenue, which I understand on the publisher end. I understand the incentive on the short-term incentive on the marketplace end anyway. The second thing is a lot of or almost all of the sites in the marketplace inherently, if they're in the marketplace, they know that the site is a money producing asset. And one of the ways the site can make money is by selling links. Obviously, they were in a link marketplace. I think that also makes it highly likely that they overlap with the sites who maybe went very overboard on every piece of content is best XYZ or XYZ review, right? Where like every article was just affiliate centered, and that was obvious. And there's no real brand behind the site, right? It's not like folks are looking for that site by name. It probably doesn't get much traffic outside of organic search traffic. Basically, it's in the bullseye of the stuff that looks like the HCU update went after. Well, okay, so now you have like sites that fit that mold were probably heavily present in a bunch of link marketplaces to begin with, right? So the type of site that the HCU went after overlaps a good amount with the type of site that was selling links in the past. And you have folks that even if they weren't selling links in the past, post HCU, I got nothing to lose. Screw it. I might as well try and sell some links off this thing, right? So I think the work of doing your own diligence and making sure that like you feel good about the stuff you're buying is much harder now because there's just so much more noise in the system than there was 24 months ago.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's probably the case all across the industry, right? It's just like
Sure. Yeah.
uncertainty and
Yeah. I don't envy running a link marketplace at present, right? Because it's a big, like, competing pressure of you want and need large inventory, but if you kicked out every site that lost 60 or 70% of its traffic, like, you won't have a whole lot left, right? So I get the, like, competing incentives, and don't envy the folks that are in the position of, like, having to make that choice of, like, do we take short-term pain to try and, like, I don't know how many folks are interested in building a long-term brand name around a link marketplace to begin with. So maybe there's not competing pressure, and I'm just making that up in my own head. But it doesn't seem terribly low stress, I would say.
yes, yes. All right. Let me ask two specific questions based off of notes that you or things that you said earlier. So I'm going to expand a little bit on this idea of like building links from scratch, starting a site from scratch, and how to build links there. The easy way, obviously, is to buy links. You get a bunch of guest post sites, right, and just kind of start building your authority there. What are alternatives?
Yeah, so I think the ideal way. So I'll use Charlotte as the example, right? Like, if I'm starting a thing, I would first look to, well, sorry, are we talking about like actual businesses that are trying to build links, or are we talking about like content sites that are just trying to monetize affiliate traffic?
Yeah.
Like, what? Because they're two very different answers.
Yeah, great question. Let's say you're an actual business, a dentist or a small business that wants to have an online presence. You're not a content focused affiliate site or something.
So I should asterisk, like, I don't mean to say that publishers aren't real business. You certainly can be.
Know.
the large majority of sites that pop up are not destined to be actual businesses. They're like a hobby attempt at making some quick money. So I don't want folks that run legitimate content businesses to like think they're garbage and get offended. But that's the quickest way, right? Like, do you mean a real business, or do you mean a brick and mortar, like
brick and mortar business? Yeah, when I say business, I would say brick and mortar. Yeah.
So for a dentist, right? Like, I would be looking at, in Charlotte, it's Charlotte Agenda, right? Like local media that covers like who's hiring, who's, they do a lot of like restaurant, food and drink, entertainment type stuff. So like dentist isn't exactly in the wheelhouse, but that model of like, if you live in a major or semi-major city, there's probably local blogs or publishers that focus on like stuff happening in the area. So I think I would look to that, like, it's like a truly local link, right? Like the relevancy is spot on there in terms of the geo relationship. So stuff like that I think is really easy to lean on. Local sponsorships, right? Like your local chamber of commerce may list all its members, and you can get a link from that. Again, puts you in good company. Geo relevance is really high. Sponsoring local stuff, right? Like little leagues and whatever else, like all need sponsorships. Libraries are always in need of funding, right? So like you can do some good and like get some good PR out of it as well, right? Like basically the stuff that you would do if search engines as a thing didn't really exist. Like, what would you have done 20 years ago? Right. Chances are the list is 20 years ago, Jesus, 30 years ago. I forget that I'm old. The stuff that you would have done without search engine results in mind is like very similar to the stuff that you would do with search engines in mind, because like those things also tend to be very beneficial if there's a link component to them as well. So I think focusing on that would be the good start to like build that initial base up.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about this idea of, would you still want to link from this site if Google didn't exist, right? Like how much value? That kind of sounds like what you're saying. I mean, in most of those cases, though, it does sound like you're still going to have to shell out money. Is it possible?
Sponsorships and stuff, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, is it possible to do this with no budget these days? So yeah, it's possible, because I think it used to be, right?
Yeah. So I think possible, sure. it's a lot harder, right? But like, I don't know that anybody should have the expectation that like I can, like, again, where we're talking about like what if search engines didn't exist, like, I don't think your expectation would be that you can start a business for free, right? Like that's not, that's a weird like base level assumption that like none of this should cost me anything. Like since I don't know since when that's been true. How domains used to be $30 a year. Now they're like 99 cents for some
Right.
extensions. So I think it's certainly, I don't know that I'd call anything impossible, but it's significantly harder to do it without having some sort of budget or even just like time, right? Like there's brick and mortar stores in my hometown where during the pandemic, they naturally got crushed because they couldn't be open for business anymore. So the woman who owns it pivoted to selling on eBay, selling on Etsy, stuff that she hadn't really done before, but it was like, I need some way to get revenue continuing because like this has been a business she's owned for the last 25 years. And then the other biggie, which ended up working really well for her, doing weekly Facebook Live streams, doing like product demos, and then letting people just comment, like claiming that they want one. And then somebody would like her assistant would DM them and like coordinate to take their credit card payment over the phone.
Wow.
And then they would just pick up at the location without ever having to go in the store. Like they would just run it out, like ordering curbside pickup at a restaurant, except physical product. And it got to the point where, not that it's like a meaningful amount of money, but like she now makes a few $100s a month from Facebook just from the live stream activity that she's generating every week, right? So like there are creative ways that you could do it where like that didn't cost her anything to do, but she burned a lot of time doing it. So if it never worked, like that would have been a whole bunch of wasted time, right? So like you're gonna expend budget, whether it's money or time, in some way to try and get this to work. And again, like I would significantly question the success likelihood of somebody who goes into opening a business trying to figure out like how can I open a business without spending any money. Like you're stacking the deck against you. Like you can try, but like, oh man, are you like playing on hard mode? Like that's not ideal.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up this idea of like this like quality versus quantity thing, right? Like I think the thing that's hurt link building, at least from my perspective over the years, is just the focus on quantity over quality. So what you get is this talk of cost per link all the time, and you want to get the most from your money, and people equate that with quantity for the most part. And the quality factors, if you're not educated enough, they kind of just fall from the wayside. Do you think there's ever a point when quantity trumps quality in the case of link buying? Like where you should be going out, or, have you seen successes where people go out and just I'm going to buy 100 links and just really, blast this to try to.
Yeah. So they're more rare, but I think the place where I've seen that happen is kind of like way back in my original answer, the situations where like it's a legitimate brand, they're large, they're to pick a number like DRDA authority score or whatever, like 80 plus, like established significant web presence. Everybody's got a link for like, and by everybody I mean them and their 3-4 major competitors. Like everybody has a link from the Guardian or New York Times or fill in the blank on like the major media that you want coverage on. Like we've just stalemated because everybody's got coverage on the majors, and like we're the 3 category leaders in the space. And so like link quality, we all have it, right? So then at that point, you're in this arms race of like the differentiation comes in from volume on the lower tiers and what pages, what anchor text, how fast are they coming in? Like what's the velocity look like what is that angle? So that it happens. I think most mere mortals don't have to play that game and be involved in that fight, but they exist. It's just not the case for like most publishers and most folks that I would imagine are representative of the buyer side of these marketplaces.
Yeah, that makes total sense. All right, another quick hit question here is the idea of buying links just for link diversity's sake. Is that ever something you would do? Do you look at the diversity of a link profile as kind of a differentiating factor or ranking factor?
You mean like just in terms of having a higher LRD count, or?
No. So, say like a lot of people talk about link diversity, right? Like you want to have a nice diverse backlink portfolio.
Mm.
If say you're working with a digital PR agency and all you get are high-end news links, right? But you don't have you're not getting links from local businesses or something, is that something that people do? Is that something you'd recommend to kind of shore up these holes in your link profile?
Yeah, so I think I would more commonly myself and recommend for people to pursue if what you're after is anchor diversity. So if you're getting a bunch of high-end links and it's always the brand name or the name of the face of the company, then exploring some link purchasing to complement that with like mixing in some partial phrase match anchors on the keywords that you want to go rank for, that's interesting. I don't know that I would look at it as a like diversity play of like, oh man, we've got all these great links, let's go buy some real mediocre shit so that we balance it out. Like that stuff will happen all on its own. You don't need to go expend budget to get crummy stuff. So like that would be a strange use case. Anchor though, to me makes a whole lot of sense in both directions. Like one, like we've done a bunch of link programs in the past and our backlink portfolio anchors are really heavy on keywords. Like going and buying a bunch of branded anchor text can help kind of like try and push you back into a safer zone. But on the diversity standpoint, like anchors are really where I would anchor on that. That would be the focal point for sure. Cheese aside, not so much the like traffic tiers.
Yeah. The sites that say write for us and they clearly offer guest posts. Is that something you avoid on principle?
For stuff that isn't like high tier, right? Like there are legitimate publishers that accept submissions from contract writers and like they may pay you if they accept your article, right? Like all write for us pages are not created equal. In general, it's like a yellow card. Like, yeah, it may not disqualify you completely, but like it's not helping. And if like there's a couple other like there's only so many marks and columns that you can get an X in before like you get tossed, and that's certainly one of them for sure.
Yeah. I guess let's close this out with this question about this failing for people, right?
Maybe like you're buying links and it's not working.
Yeah. Or some ways that, right. Maybe an agency is doing it for you. What are some of the biggest signals that you've seen where it's failing and why?
Yeah. So I think a biggie is, unfortunately, you have unsophisticated folks on the buyer side, whether that is an agency doing it or the end client, like somebody in-house at a client at the actual end business receiving the link, who's not doing much diligence into what they're buying, and they're actually buying links on mediocre sites that can't rank for anything and aren't going to bestow any trust to you through linking to you, right? So you end up just wasting your money on stuff that like somebody who knows more than you would not have purchased to begin with, right? That I think is the biggest reason, because, and like it's hard to fault people, right? Like you should take it seriously and want to learn about this if like you're trying to make money on the internet and through SEO specifically. But I understand the folks who just like don't go super deep and just hear enough to understand like, oh, links are important for ranking in Google. I need links. Here's people that are selling links. Like this shit's easy. Like this is very straightforward, right? Like I'll just go buy these lists, right? So like I think there's a lot of folks that fall into that trap of not having a deep level of understanding. I think that's probably the most common. I think for others, there's probably pockets where links aren't the problem. So in the past, like the SERPs look very, very different now, but like 2 years ago, if you were trying to rank an e-commerce page, an e-commerce product listing page for Vest XYZ, buying a bunch of links to try and make that happen probably wasn't going to get you anywhere because the whole front page was listicles, right? Like the type of stuff Google was clearly biasing towards ranking wasn't the type of page that you were trying to push on. So like, have at it, spend all the money you want. Like it's very hard to force a page type into a SERP if Google clearly has a preference for a different page type. So part of it could just be like a foundational strategy misalignment of like what you're trying to rank for what SERPs. And if you keep hammering that, like it may not do you any good. But I think people buying mediocre stuff is probably the biggest like overall contributor to it not working. Is like you're probably just buying links that aren't very good, or like your domain is wrecked and almost no matter what you do, like the first page ain't gonna happen, or they're just like way overshooting their fighting weight, right? Like if you launch a new site tomorrow and you want to go rank for credit card review terms, like you better have a lot of budget and a lot of time to like wait this one out because it's not going to happen quick.
Yeah. That is one of the biggest things that I saw. Not the credit card thing, but the idea that in a lot of cases, sites that were hit by the helpful content update, no matter what they did, you could build super quality links. You could build a ton of them. They didn't seem to help at all. Like the helpful content seemed to be the biggest.
Dark clouds are hard to get rid of. Like once you run afoul, like that update in particular, like it seems like that will follow you around for quite a long time. Now, like we could be a month away from an update rolls out and we see a bunch of right, like wild stuff can happen and has happened before. But for sure, like if the site has a bad mark against it somewhere. Yeah, so I liken it to, in SEO in general, I liken to taking supplements, right? Like you can take an iron supplement all you want. If you weren't iron deficient to begin with, you're not going to notice anything. But like somebody that was iron deficient is going to be like, oh my God, this stuff's amazing. Like I feel so much better. Yeah. Well, like, yeah, that was the solution to the actual problem you have. I think folks can very commonly misdiagnose the problem that they have and spend money on a solution that could be a totally legitimate solution to somebody else's problem. It just was never the answer to your problem. And like spending more money on it isn't going to make that true all of a sudden.
Yeah. Well, I wish we could leave on a more positive note about the helpful content update. But to your point, it could be as little as next week Google releases something, and we are seeing some of these sites recover. I saw 20%, of the sites that were impacted recovered 20% in the last something. So
20% of their recent traffic, or 20%
of the traffic they were dinged for.
Oh, got 20% back of what they lost.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's not a win.
It's not a win. It's progress.
Fair.
So, Ian, I want to thank you so much for your time. Let me just put a bow on this because to help me kind of understand this, it seems like one of the smartest ways that you can kind of evaluate this stuff is it's not a one size fits all. It's kind of what I'm getting from you. Like there are a lot of industry specific evaluations you have to make. There's a lot of competitor specific evaluations, timeline of your business. Not only in just like link buying, but like SEO in general, right? Like the SERP that you're trying to compete in. Yep. It sounds to me that like that is the smarter way to do things, and kind of how you seem to evaluate, most of the stuff you do, huh?
For sure. And I think it is doubly true. So like you said, that's true for like SEO in general, but I think it's very true for stuff like link buying. If you're looking at expending like significant money every month to go pursue this thing, like it is well worth the extra time and effort in the beginning to understand exactly like what are we doing, why, what do we expect, how long are we going to do this before we make a call on like working, not working, so continue or stop. do not just start spending money on links because you think generically like links are good and I need more links to rank in Google. Yes, but like, please spend the time to figure out like what you're actually doing and do it intentionally, just like anything else. But like I said, especially in this where you're talking about like thousands of dollars a month in spend to go try and do it.
Yeah, I expect us to get a lot of feedback, or at least people have a lot of questions about this kind of stuff. So please, if you do, leave a comment. I'm sure Ian would be happy to answer, or I'm happy to relay to Ian. And maybe there's a part 2 of this if people do have a lot of questions. Ian, thanks again so much for your time. You can catch Ian online, Traffic Think Tank. He's very active on there, obviously, as co-founder. He is active on LinkedIn. Are you on Twitter, X, these days?
Just at Ian Howells. Very hidden, very hard to find.
Hard to find Ian. Well, thanks again, everyone. Reminder, like and subscribe, leave a review. That would help us out a lot. And thanks again to Ian.
Awesome. Thanks, Vince.